What's up, you scholars of enlightenment? It is that time of the month again. It is time for another tech roundup with my good friend and colleague, tech guru, Ramsey Faragher. Remember, he is the real life James Bond Q, according to Top Gear magazine. Ramsey, how are we doing this month?
Hi Sam, I'm very good. How are you doing?
Yeah, not too bad. Can't complain. So, on today's tech roundup, we're going to be looking at the return of the LHC, Avi Loeb seeing aliens in pretty much everything, which is nothing new. Helicopters catching rockets, which is pretty amazing. Some other bits and pieces if we have time. And of course, how can we get away from it? Because it's dominating the entirety of tech news. Elon Musk buying Twitter. So before we get started, Ramsey, anything else? Your little son passed his 11 plus at 4 years of age or something, didn't he? Do you want to get that out there? Because you've been telling everyone you can get hold of
it. Sure. I have a rather gifted little son, yes, who's 4, and basically taught himself maths and how to read and write and stuff. And the school let him sit the 11 plus SATs, even though he's in reception.
No, that's wrong. It was like Matilda, where like they were asking him to help out on something, and suddenly realised that he knows the entirety of maths.
He's far ahead of his class, so he has his dedicated teacher and stuff, and they let him do all sorts of things to help them, and he was helping with the photocopying, and it turned out he was photocopying some 11 plus SAT papers, and after he photocopied them, he did them, and they marked them.
Some Riemann Cauchy integrals, and he was just there we go.
He's not on contour integrals yet, but I'm getting him there. He knows more of his cubes than I do. So he's pretty much got a photographic memory, so he shall go far and always remember how far he got.
Amazing. So let's move into these topics. So the first up, we can't get away from it, and we started talking about it a little bit last month because it was sort of coming up into the news. Elon Musk has now bought Twitter for $44 billion. Now, what upset me a little bit about this is that this is sort of twice NASA's annual budget to buy the cesspit that is Twitter. But okay, or if you want to put it in even better units, half of Ramsey's company's annual take. So
the hockey stick, we're getting there. It's the hockey stick. We'll take it.
It's exponential, but we're on the low part of the exponential. That's a problem, right? But we get there. That's what I say about my YouTube viewership as well. We're on the low part of the exponential, but we're doing all right. 30k now. So
44 billion is absolutely staggering, isn't it? But I mean, that's certainly not in cash, is it? So he's been leveraging Tesla stock and all sorts of things to create $44 billion on computer screens. But we should have done an order of magnitude calculation as to how many $1 bills that is. That must go a number of times to the moon and back, surely. Answers in the chat before we finish.
That's a good idea. Answers in the chat for that. So $44 billion in crisp $1 bills. How far is that stacking up? How many briefcases are we going to have to be filling? Perhaps.
Does NASA need an annual budget, or could it just staircase its way to the solar system?
Would this be enough to get us to Uranus, all the way to Uranus with $1 bills, possibly?
How long did it take for you to get that joke in?
With enough
4 minutes.
With enough to wipe when you get there. So this did move with pretty fast speed, as we said. Last time we spoke, the idea was that the Twitter board was going to adopt what's called a poison pill plan, so they didn't have to be essentially swallowed up by Elon Musk. You know more about this than I do, particularly the sort of business ins and outs. So what does that mean, and why did it just seem to do nothing?
So, it all comes down to what shareholders will vote for and what they want to do. So fundamentally, he'd originally got this 9.2 stake, and having different levels of ownership in the company gives you certain rights. So typically, for example, more than 10% is required for a board seat, although he was getting a board seat for 9.2, as it turned out. More than 25% means you're a person of significant control, which typically means you can veto stuff, or your signature is required to just about have anything go through. The poison pill would have been that after he got his 9.2% stake and was expressing this interest in going further, it's the opportunity for them to put into what's called their articles of association, like the governance of the company, some certain rules on how much individuals are allowed to own and not own. And so they could have pushed through basically some new restrictions within the company to fundamentally prevent a single person owning more than a certain amount of shares.
So put in some controls before he became too powerful, essentially, and then have the ability to sort of get over those controls.
Yeah, and fundamentally, Elon offered them so much money, this staggering amount of money, that the shareholders would rather that they could cash out a ludicrous, huge boost in the company's value than worry about the poison pill stuff. So there's all sorts of versions of, aggressive takeovers of companies and things people might try and do to stop them. But fundamentally, money always talks. There's always a price for everything. There was a price for Twitter. It was 44 billion.
Fair enough. So the question becomes, as you say, this is an obscene amount of money. The question becomes, why is he doing this? So his line on this is that, it's all about free speech. It's all about the bedrock of a functioning democracy. And Twitter has essentially become the de facto town square where people go to discuss big ideas and, social media, Facebook, Twitter, what have you. And he's a very long-termist guy. He's a very big thinker. So he wants to have his fingers in what he sees as the biggest issues. We've seen he's been complaining about, for example, Twitter blocking this story about the Hunter Biden laptop. So this seems to be more about power, doesn't it? The influence that Twitter can have seems to be more what he's sort of leaning into than monetizing the platform. You mentioned that you thought he might try and monetize certain aspects, but why do you think? What do you think his major goal is with this acquisition?
Yeah, it's so hard to understand what is really going on here, whether it is just a mixture of all of these things, because
you can never trust his tweets though, because half of them are just troll nonsense, and I'm sure some sort of business savvy and obfuscation, what have you. So it's hard to know exactly what he's thinking at any one time.
I mean, he definitely personally uses Twitter like it's his SpaceX and Tesla marketing team. And he's very proud of the fact that he does a huge amount of personal marketing on Twitter, for good and bad. He's got himself in all sorts of trouble, previously financial naughtiness, saying things on Twitter that change stock prices. So if you're being a bit cynical, this could potentially be simply a way for him to ensure he's always protected something that he personally has used to great effect for his own personal reasons in the past. It's not $44 billion of his own money at all. It's all leveraged against Tesla stock and all sorts, and tanked the Tesla stock a few days ago. The process that's been going on. Now, as soon as you say a company's worth 44 billion, the first questions are, well, how much profit is it actually making right now? And therefore, how many years would it really actually have to run for in order to hit anything like these sorts of numbers?
So I was going to mention this.
Startups are the exact area of bonkers valuations that are completely and utterly nothing to do. There are companies that are unicorns that are valued more than $1 billion, that's a unicorn, that aren't profitable at all. And it's all just promise and the fact that venture capitalists will buy shares at a silly valuation, assuming it gets even sillier. But Musk has at least put out the ways that he would try or propose some ways that he would try to further improve its profitability. So Twitter fundamentally was classic startup route of completely free at first and completely user-friendly at first, and burning venture capital money and a nice social media, social network tool. And then they started sliding in adverts just like Facebook had too. And, once you got the captive audience, advertising suddenly pays for it, and then suddenly you become a profitable business, really obvious business model for social networks. But Twitter's user base is only a few hundred million, and their profits are not staggering. And
so just to give people an idea of those numbers, so Twitter's only recently become a profitable business. So what is it, Q4 of 2017 when it started to make any money? And it wasn't too much in the world of Elon Musk. The users seem to be sort of capping out as we go over time, although should be noted that there's been excitement with obviously Elon coming on board, and the numbers have shot up a little bit recently. But as you sort of mentioned, compared to a Facebook, compared to a YouTube or WhatsApp, the number of users is pretty much really far down. So, obviously there's a cost for everything, there's a use for everything, but it's small beer in terms of monetization potentially compared to some of the others.
Yeah, and if you go back to that other graph, it's really interesting.
This one?
In terms of, so I can't see for the resolution on the feed, unfortunately, but it's capped out at what? The 300 million?
About 300 million monthly active users.
Which is quite interesting because you're basically saying that
isn't that about the population of the US?
Well, I was going to say that of the global population of the world, the whatever that is, a few billion, the population of celebrities, trolls, and smartasses is roughly 300 million. That's where we've. And the question is, which one are you? I like to think I'm a bit of all of those. But yes, that is very interesting. So he seems to his suggestion, and I welcome anyone in the chat to give their suggestions of why they think he's taking over this panel. His line is all about free speech. He actually said he wants to make it maximum fun, which sounds horrendous. But he seems to think that he's gonna clean up Twitter. He's going to make it more publicly trusted. So there's been problems in the past where people have felt they've been kicked off the platform without appropriate reason. But then, of course, Elon Musk, being as Elon Musk is, he starts off by saying he's going to piss off the far right, the far left the same, and then he dives into sort of going in on one side. So here he is saying far left hates everyone, themselves included. He jumps in showing these cartoons that say it's the left that's causing all the problems, as we go forward, basically. And more and more of this sort of stuff, sharing Joe Rogan memes and Tim Pool memes. So he's gone in quite hard on one side. Seems to be that the problems that he has with the far left. And, there are problems with the far left. There are problems with issues of speech and things like this. But I don't know. Elon seems to have a particular idea of what free speech means. And it seems to be very sort of libertarian, say what you like. And, the only real platform where you have that is something like an 8chan, where people can just say whatever the hell you like. And it very quickly descends into sort of a horrible dystopia that nobody wants to be on. So it's going to be interesting to see how he sort of walks that line between free speech, letting people talk, having all the ideas on the platform, and also having a platform that people actually want to come to every day and not just be called an N-word or a C or whatever it is. And yeah, there's definitely very strong similarities between Elon Musk and Donald Trump's use of Twitter, and you can definitely relate a lot of Trump's successes to his use of Twitter. And of course, then he got banned from it, and thankfully, we barely hear from him anymore. But I'm sure if he'd not been banned from Twitter, Trump would still be absolutely, firmly in lots of headlines all the time because of the sheer amount of reach he was getting. And so I do think, like you kind of said, part of this is Elon's fear that if he was ever cut off from Twitter for whatever reason, it would actually significantly impact like how he markets his companies and stuff. So I'm not sure how much of this was I'm going to make the world a better place by putting 44 billion into this instead of healthcare and clean water.
It's a lot of money to pay for for saying you're going to clean up the Wild West of Twitter.
If someone was giving me $44 billion to make the world a better place and defend free speech, I wouldn't start with Twitter. There's definitely something else to this. But there's been bits he said about opening up algorithms and kind of making things a bit more open as to how it works. And again, I find that quite strange.
I did want to ask about that. So in terms of the changes that he suggested, we talked about the edit button, last month. That's more a little sort of technical change, and that might not work. But one of the things he did suggest was to make the code open source. So where is that one? We are somewhere around.
But he said the algorithm.
The algorithm, that's right.
The funny thing that happened next, I don't know if you saw this, some current Twitter staff created a GitHub, which is basically a repository online where people do share source code. It's like a social network for geeks, I suppose. But GitHub, they created this repository there called like the Twitter algorithm open sourced, and it was just a completely empty GitHub. The point being,
yeah, I
like,
did see that. Yeah, I did see this.
The satire being like, there isn't this one algorithm that like Elon is referring to, and actually, just like with all social media and other main outlets at the moment, there's actually still an awful lot of like human control over if someone's being banned or verifying if content that's been flagged as good or bad is actually good or bad.
And then people will say that then there's obviously bias in the humans who are doing it. They're too left wing or they're too whatever it is.
Exactly, it could be. And the only algorithm I think that you can look at that really is an algorithm is going to be the bit of code that's deciding what appears on your feed. And that might be all he's referring to. But in terms of like what happens if people complain about something be bad or how someone gets banned, I strongly suspect there's a lot of human oversight still in that. So I'm guessing he's actually just referring to why do certain things appear in his feed in a certain order in a certain time and so on.
Yeah, that makes sense. In terms of just chucking a load of code out there, like you say, there probably isn't that one just holy grail piece of code. And also, I can't believe, having seen the sort of dumps on certain vaccines and things like this, huge data dumps that happen, that will then have everyone just going, oh yeah, fine, we see the code now, like everything's fine behind the scenes. It would just be, well, is there another set of code being run actually on the servers? Are there people, making decisions behind the scenes regardless of that code? I can't see it being this golden bullet where everyone just goes, oh, we see the code of Twitter now, so everyone's happy. I can't see that at all.
I very much doubt that for years, entire teams inside Twitter have been laboring over the most complicated algorithms as to how and why things happen. It's going to be like, how many tweets from this person have you read in the past?
Yeah.
How many things have you liked from this person in the past? How many people do you follow? And it's going to be a very, very simple set of rules, really, that's based on, we will put more things in your feed that you look at yourself more often. So, I mean, this thing about open sourcing, there's a big difference between like making it visible and actually open sourcing something from the point of view of other people can edit it and submit suggestions as to how it's changed. And so there are lots of examples in the world where entire repositories are open source and anyone can contribute to them, and other members of the community choose which things they do want to put in and keep and things like that. And if he's talking about that, then that is indeed just going to cause absolute carnage, because you'll just have all of these people piling in all of these suggestions and requests and ideas for how they would change the algorithm. And that's just not going to work.
The other
because trolling audience, there'd be a lot of people trolling the open source code base as well.
Of course, right. The other thing he suggested was we're going to defeat these spam bots or die trying. So anyone who's ever spent any time on social media, eventually you start to get the, massage and love you long time or Russian spam or whatever it is. Or a lot of NFT stuff now and crypto stuff tends to be in the kind of bot spam that you get. These will be accounts that.
I've lost your audio, Sam. I don't know if it's me. No, it's gone. Oh,
am I back?
Back now.
I don't know what happened there. So
you were saying Russian spam bots.
So anyone who's ever been on, anyone who's been on social media for a while, you'll notice that for a while you get, certain accounts that don't appear to be real people, potentially bot accounts, usual stuff about, anti-vaccines or NFTs or all sorts of rubbish that you don't want to hear about necessarily, a lot of people. And Elon has said that this is one of the things that we want to fight or die trying. Now, this has been a problem for a while, and they don't seem to have been able to get a hold on it. Have you got any ideas as to how they might deal with this?
Yeah, it's a really interesting one.
Mentioned things like, maybe a cooling off period when you sign up for an account, or things like this, or having to put your own ID to a particular account when you sign up. These have all been things that have been floated in the past, and they never seem to have got too much traction. So, and again, anyone in the comments, if you want to comment and suggest how we might be able to get over this spamming, authenticate people, I'd love to hear your ideas. What are your ideas there, Ramsey?
There's no super easy answer, because the whole point is by Twitter making it very easy for you to set up and start using an account, especially through APIs. You might be a developer who wants to write your own app or use a website that actually uses Twitter as a backend, and it kind of communicates as a computer to Twitter. So, for example, I could install like some sensors on the roof of my office here in Focal Point to do with GPS or like rain detection with a Raspberry Pi, and I could use Twitter APIs to have a channel called like Focal Point Weather Forecast.
Yeah.
And there's a robot on my roof doing little tweets as to what the weather in Cambridge is going to be.
They've got
like.
little bots that do the Wordle stats every day, and all these kind of things, haven't they? Yeah.
Exactly. That's a useful bot, a cool little bot.
It didn't have to be like things that you don't want to hear. It can be, quite interesting things and useful things as well.
Exactly. And this is the thing, like it can be set up for really useful little robots, and plenty of them exist. The problem is it's also therefore so easy for it to be spam botty. And so
it's hard to get the differentiation between the two, right? Because some people want to hear about NFTs, some people want to hear about Swedish massage parlors in their area or whatever it might be. So
yeah. So you end up with the community self-policing. So people complaining, going, "Oh, I think this is a spam bot. You should get rid of it." But the very same button that you used to complain about the spam bot that you want to get rid of will be the very same button that you're complaining that you don't like Donald Trump and you think he should go, and you don't like Hillary Clinton and you think she should go. So you've got this horrible inevitable loop when you do open. So the only thing they can do is remove all bots, and as you say, it's only human people. And then you've got the ways of how do you verify that, and that restricts people wanting to access the platform. If you had to put credit card details in or type in your
well, this is one of the comments we've got in the chat. They said AB Coates saying, I think Elon said he might use paywalls verification via payment details to reduce the spam. So instead of just sticking a bot on there, if you have to pay $10 to put it on there every time, you might think, oh, I'm not really going to bother. Or it's linked directly to your payment details when you do put up spam bots. So
yeah, it is really hard. I mean, the only other things you could do is make it so that the bots were accounts that did have to pay for, and once you paid for them, it was really easy. If you see what I mean, like the APIs were only open to people who paid, something like that. I mean, yeah, there's a variety of things you try and do, but none of them are easy and straightforward is the problem.
It's not. It's definitely not easy that I can see on the sort of coding side, because an algorithm trying to differentiate between these things. You've shown me before, and I've shown you these sort of image recognition algorithms where they'll look at a wolf on a forest. It'll say something like octopus. It's incredibly difficult for an algorithm to differentiate between what is a spam bot and what is the Wordle statistics bot of the day. You can't do it on frequency of posting. Can you do it on specific words? It's very, 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 very difficult. So as you sort of alluded to, it's going to have to still be a lot of human input, human decision making on that side of things.
Yeah, and one of the other problems is not just the bots, but the anonymity that humans will use, and you could have multiple accounts. And there are sock puppet accounts where someone creates a load of anonymous accounts and uses them to big themselves up, or go and attack some of their people who oppose their views. And so it's really getting into this Twitter cesspool. It's not just spam. There's also humans choosing to have like one public profile and then a bunch of trolley profiles that are anonymous, and they just go troll all the people who
I think this is going to be the biggest issue, and I mean it has been the biggest issue of people have been sort of discussing over the last sort of few weeks on Twitter, is going to be the movement, and whether you like it or not, I'm not going to. People can decide, where they want to draw the lines, but the movement at the moment is being to try and get hold of misinformation, lying, harassment, these kind of things online. That tends to be where the movement is going. Now you can think that's going too far, and that's fine, but that tends to be where the movement is going. And then Elon Musk has turned up and said, actually, I want this very sort of libertarian seeming open space where people can discuss ideas, which, in a nutshell, in a vacuum, sounds fantastic. Everyone would like that. But the problem is we see what happens when that does happen. You go on a 4chan and 8chan where people are just literally saying whatever the hell they like. Suddenly, it's full of anti-vax rubbish. It's full of conspiracy theory rubbish. And people will say, look, well, it's my right to listen to that stuff. And I do agree. You can listen to that stuff if you like. Everyone should have a right to listen to whatever the hell they want. But will it make Twitter just another 4chan, another trolley type place? It seems there's no real platform in reality where you just get to say whatever the hell you want and there's no user guidelines or constraints. It's not really a thing that happens in real life. And it's going to be really interesting to see that interplay between his stated goals of it being very sort of libertarian and open and welcoming to different ideas, and where those lines eventually get drawn. Because I think a lot of experts, a lot of people who've worked in the space seem to think he's just going to wander into it and he doesn't know the headache he's going to get, basically.
Yeah, there's also an interesting thing that I just find it fascinating that when people do keep banging on about free speech and social media and stuff like that, like these social media platforms are all run by companies, and the companies can choose by their terms of agreements and the statements that you're effectively signing up to when you create an account, if you bother to read the small print.
Which nobody does, obviously.
Companies do not defend or promote or are forced to abide by free speech guidelines at all. Like governments are. Like, a government that says it will support free speech will allow people to be able to, put across their views in a public forum and things. But a company, the board of directors, and a code of conduct and rules, and statements about how it looks after its customers or
users,
that doesn't have to abide by free speech at all. So I find it very, really interesting when that's conflated in that way. Like, Twitter is just a program that people use to talk to each other. It's not a government.
And that's what I mean. It's going to be very interesting where he draws those lines, isn't it? It's going to be very, very interesting to see, because he comes across as this very libertarian idea of free speech, but he has some awkward things of this in his past. We've got the old pedo guy, cave comments. We've got people say that when people disagree with him in the company, he used to hire PIs and sort of basically run them out of the company. So I don't know how much truth to this stuff there is, and what the exact deal behind these things is, but it's going to be very, very interesting to see where he decides to draw the lines on these things relative to what he says he's going to do. So I guess we'll just have to keep an eye out on that and see and see where it goes.
By the way, before you move on,
yes,
a nice bit of this mess is actually just reminding me, if you go back one slide where he called it
maximum fun.
If you
go on, we have to go back to this. This is the
so. If you've not seen the documentary on this, I think it's on Netflix, or anyone watching, it's the most amazing documentary that you should definitely
watch. So this is
watch.
the Chilean miners, weren't they? They were trapped in a cave, and it was filling with water, was it? And
no, not the Chilean miners. This was the school kids. This was a football team. So it was in some distant Thailand, maybe. I think.
Thailand caves, apparently. Thailand.
Yeah.
So I'm mixing up my
you're
my underground trap people.
Yeah, that was a decade or so ago. The Chilean miners. This is just an amazing story. The 12 kids and their teacher or something trapped in a caving complex, and a bunch of amateur divers from all over the planet converged and saved them. And just it's a phenomenal documentary. So let me see if I can quickly find it. It's the best bit of any story to do with Elon Musk.
So we've got just while you're sort of looking for that, couple of comments. So they say the biggest problem is truth overload. There's enough true or true seeming information for two people with totally.
Your audio's going to get, buddy.
My audio's gone. What's going on?
It's back.
I need to stop moving around. So one of the comments saying the biggest problem is truth overload. There's enough information out there for two people with basically diametrically opposed views to believe they're getting the correct information, which I agree with. There's an awful lot of trash out there, which is sort of unfiltered and uncensored. And then the problem on the other side of that is if you're going to crack down really hard, you're going to have a centralized system where somebody's in charge of what's true is what people worry about. So in actuality, with all platforms, there tends to be a dial that you set between those, right? To try and have as soft a touch as you can and allow as much as you can without the harm as you see it on your platform, which you decide, being too great. Now, if people think you're being overly biased, they'll move to a different platform. They'll move to Rumble or Odyssey or whatever they want to move to. And if they think you're being too soft, again, they'll move away because it's now full of racists and weirdos and conspiracists or whatever you want. So in reality, on all platforms, there's a setting on that dial, isn't there? And people will decide, I like the setting of this dial on this platform or this platform. And they'll march with they'll vote with their feet, essentially.
Yeah, you end up selecting your echo chamber. Yeah. It's tricky.
It is very, very tricky. It is very, very tricky. It's incredibly tricky. I think I agree with a lot of the sort of analysts who are saying I don't know if he knows how tricky it's going to be. Maybe he does. I'm sure he's got excellent people in place and he's got a lot of money to throw at it. So we'll have to see. Did you find something that you wanted to look at?
Well, I was just going to say, just like everything he does, he'll claim that he'll have solved it in just 1 year's time. So that's Elon's standard move. I'm still waiting for my robot that dances around on stage because I'm pretty sure that was 1 year.
Oh, the Tesla bot, yeah.
Yeah.
We'll have to see. We're getting some good comments in. I'll just cover one more comment before we move on to the next thing.
Your audio's gone. Whatever you're doing, stop doing it.
Stop moving. Is it? I don't know what's going on. It shouldn't be going off. Are you?
It's back now.
Right.
Yeah.
I don't know. I'll just keep my head still. Right.
Yeah.
So I'll just bolt upright. 44 billion in $1 bills lined end to end. He says is 694,000 miles. So
cool.
What's
anyone remember off the top of their head the distance to the moon?
Well, it's one light second, isn't it? So it's 3 times 10 to the 8.
Oh.
So what's the distance to the moon in miles? Have a look.
It's coming up now. So if you Google distance to the moon in miles, it says 385,000 kilometers. So do that quickly times 5/8. But yeah, call it. And
so 44 billion $1 bills we're saying could get to the moon. Are we saying?
Well, what did your man say that it was?
He says 694,000 miles.
Oh, there you go. Easily there and back.
So easily there and back.
Some pocket change.
To the moon and back. There we go. So official apparently. Now I haven't sense checked those numbers at all. I'm probably but I'll AB is usually pretty good, so we'll go with that. And then if
240,000
if it's 14 orders of magnitude out when I do the calculation afterwards, I'll put a disclaimer underneath. So watch out.
240,000 miles to the moon. 240,000.
Good. So we are getting there. All right. So that's probably enough chewing the fat on Elon on Twitter, and we'll have to kind of see how that goes.
It's called The Rescue on Disney Plus for those who
The Rescue.
The Rescue on Disney Plus. Yeah. I'm pretty sure that was it.
So head over
anyway,
and have a look at
I'm
that.
sure other documentaries on other expensive channels are available.
So actually, before we move on from this, we should jump onto this because you sent this to me, which I found quite amusing actually. So do you want to tell us what's happened?
Who predicted this a few months ago when we were chatting?
I think you and many others might have predicted this.
There's been a number of high-profile, amazing, crazy, like NFT crime, theft, carnage things over the last few months. So these are the non-fungible tokens where people have been making crazy little cartoon icons, basically in simple simple computer generated images and then selling the rights to owning them in the form of a blockchain. Because if you say blockchain, people think that's cool and invest in it. But
it does mean that you can put a stamp on as to who owns this, and it's hard to pass that on without it. It's hard to steal that, essentially.
The really interesting thing is all of these definitions of ownership, right? Especially when it's the classic, as I would call it, NFT of just a JPEG image, just a picture, right? So we had the very crazy example of the lovely lady, who I believe was from America, who was selling farts in a jar, if I do not misremember that.
That's right.
Now that is indeed relatively unique, I would say. There's that air in that jar. You can own that air in that jar, just like the Mona Lisa. Just didn't.
And it probably has some of her DNA in, or something you can check that it came from her, or her signature on it, or whatever it is.
Definitely.
So that's relatively fun, non-fungible.
So that, yes, you could argue in a very complicated manner. It's a bit like the delicate strokes of the oil on canvas on the original Mona Lisa. But the interesting thing about the majority of the NFTs people have been creating and selling is that they're literally just computer generated image. And so you can have an exact copy that you can steal very easily by downloading the JPEG. And so all people are buying is some warm, fuzzy feeling inside that they have like the registration on the blockchain that this thing belongs to them. But anyone can make an identical exact copy and take it. And
this is what Elon did, right? So this collage of the Bored Apes Yacht Club, which sold at Sotheby's auction house for 24.4 million, pretty much based on these ideas of ownership, like you said, that people have to agree to adhere to. Well, Elon decided he wasn't going to adhere to that, and screenshotted one of these things and stuck it as his profile picture on Twitter, I guess. Or was it on Twitter? I guess it was probably on Twitter.
They sort of contacted him, I believe, and said, please take that down. And he kind of said, what are you going to do?
Yeah. So this person, Michael, who I think it must have been the owner of this, said, please take this down. This is owned by me, or I can sell it to you for presumably $26 million. And Elon Musk said, piss off, what you're going to do seems kind of fungible. So Elon has a lot of sway in these things. He's a very big player in that world, in crypto land, in blockchain land. If he's going to say that this is nothing, it's going to have a big impact on these type of people. I would imagine, and have a big impact on that sphere. Yeah,
I mean, it's no surprise it finally collapsed, and it'll just keep bouncing. Though. It'll just be like Bitcoin. Bitcoin's done the same, just absolute carnage. And now that the sales have plummeted and presumably a lot of the values have plummeted, there'll be a lot of hype probably trying to drive them back up again. And it might just be that picture-based NFTs do die the death that they deserve. But there's an awful lot of NFT exchanges now that will continue to probably try to provide blockchain-based proof of ownership of things that truly are non-fungible and unique, as weird as they might be. But some of the bits I saw in the past as well, the past few weeks, has just been how much kind of crime has been going on here as well. So there was something I remember reading about where one of these exchanges, basically, you sort of saw your NFT picture that you buy, and there was the equivalent of like the Twitter like blue tick certification. There's this like marking on the image on the exchange website that was meant to be saying like the exchange has certified that you are buying the true NFT thing. And so what this particularly smart criminal did was took the screenshots of the legitimate NFTs without any marking of them, photoshopped on the website's like certification message, and then posted on the website this image already with the website certification message in there. So they just, rubber stamped a fake certification on it, really. And then people bought that. And so in some complicated way, people were buying the faked version with the fake certificate instead of buying the real one. and this criminal happily made loads of money doing this, not really selling the originals. And this kind of proves the point as to how bonkers it is and how easy it is to reproduce it all. Like, is there really this much value in something that can be so easily reproduced? That's not where value truly lies, surely.
Usually value lies in scarcity, right? It's
exactly
uniqueness. So it's a little bit of turning that on its head. So we'll see where that goes, but it's not looking good in NFT land at the moment. Now, one for
or it's simply that all of the criminals have now laundered all their money for the year, and so that's why it's dropped 92%. That could be the other reason, and it'll pick back up again next annual money laundering cycle. I don't know, maybe.
Don't know if the organised crime families have an April tax end of year.
They all go on holiday now from May till September, so it's all dropped off.
I'm interested in how you know that, but we'll move on. So
my sarcasm.
Exactly. So the other big thing that happened last week, a couple of weeks ago, was the LHC has turned back on now. So the LHC has been turned off for the last 3 years. Well, there's been a major upgrade. So what they've been doing is they've been upgrading the beam. So they've been narrowing the proton-proton beams at the LHC so that you get more collisions per unit time.
So what does that entail? Does that mean they've dialed up the magnetic field?
It will be tweaks to the magnet. Yeah. So the beams are shaped with essentially with magnets. So it will be changes to the magnetic field or changes to the magnets themselves along the length of the track. I'd have to have an exact.
That's what I was wondering. So I'm assuming they've upgraded them rather than just going, oh look, we could have set it to 10 all along.
No, I'm pretty sure they've been upgraded rather than just running a little bit more power into them. In fact, I think you would probably have to upgrade them before running more power into them. I'm not an expert engineer on.
How many years has it been down? Because that would probably.
So 3 years. 3 years. So I assume it has been.
Probably takes 3 years to upgrade all the magnets in LHC. Sounds about right.
Exactly. Yeah. So they've been making the beams narrower, so you get more collisions per unit time. So if you want to sort of understand sort of how that works, the relatively wide, full of protons, and now the beam is narrower, and therefore there's more probability of protons hitting each other. So more collisions per unit time. You still getting this? Yeah.
Yeah. It only dropped out for a sec. You good?
That's all right. I think it's just the
definitely correlated with how much you wave your head.
I won't move my head at all. It probably switches between mics or something stupid. I'll have a look afterwards. So they've been tightening up these beams. They're making the beams narrower. They've been increasing the collision rates. So I guess squeezing up these bunches of protons as well. So as well as being tighter, they're sort of closer together in bunches. And what that means as an upshot is that they're going to be able to take as many proton-proton collisions, as much data as they have in the last 10 years in the next 3. So essentially a 3.33 increase in data collection rate. So that's very, very interesting for certain rare processes. So we've seen a couple of intriguing results. So results from last year on lepton, flavor universality. So a lot of these hints of beyond standard model physics, they need more statistics to be significant, essentially. So the idea of getting so much more data is very, very attractive. We had a couple of weeks ago this idea that the W boson mass might be slightly too heavy. The measurements for this were done in America. There are corresponding measurements done at CERN, but at the moment they don't have the statistics to be competitive with that measurement. So these will help.
Where are we up to on that, by the way? I know you've covered it a lot. So what do people think? Do people think that there's a bias in the experimentation?
So between you, me, and the gatepost, and everyone listening on the stream, I think a lot of people think it's a mistake, but they also don't think there's any malice there, or
of course not.
That the scientists who have done it are of any lesser skill or anything like that. I just think they find it such an oddball result that they favour at the moment, that there's some sort of systematic that hasn't been fully accounted for. Now, who knows? We'll have to see. As soon as we get those LHC measurements that are shrunk down to as small error bars as the one in America will have a much more of a handle on it. But I get the sense, talking to a lot of experts in the field, they favor that it's probably an error at the moment. Now, that might just be because, you know, we're particle physicists, scientists, and we tend to be skeptical bastards anyway. So it's the right way to be to start with.
Yeah.
But I get the sense that most people think it's a little bit of a shock. I mean, even the people from Fermilab were saying, look, we didn't expect this at all. It's very, very odd. Yeah. And just the nature of the fact that it's such a difficult measurement to do, I think has people leaning towards maybe there's an error here. So many sort of anecdotes as to how difficult this thing is to do, and funding bodies suggesting that it wasn't even done in the first place because it's so difficult, and then we'll just run into this problem down the line. I don't know how far this is going to go until we get those measurements from LHC, and if they all line up nicely with the new one, then there's probably something there. But at the moment,
the elegant solution from Part 1B labs and stuff, all the stuff we used to do when we were students, is trying to do a differential measurement, right? I mean, was there nothing else? I guess not, because this wouldn't be the problem. But if there'd been other measurements being made alongside them at the same time, and they were all also shifted heavy, then you'd have some indication that there was a bias in the system. But is it just not that easy?
The problem. So there's a couple of problems on that. One is that the other experiment that is there called D0 hasn't been able to do this measurement because it wore out its tracker or whatever it was when I was talking to the chap. So there's no confirmation at that experiment of.
Oh, you mean two detectors?
Right, there's two detectors that are doing the same thing, and we don't have an updated measurement for that one. And then. What else would you want to say?
I was saying about differential measurements.
And then because it's such a difficult measurement to do in the first place, it's quite unique. So I don't think there's going to be an easy proxy to say, oh, that peak's there and they're all moved up 5 centimeters, 5 GeV or whatever.
Because that helps answer the question, right? If you did a W boson and a Higgs and a
and they're all shifted up. No, I don't think you're not going to be able to play that game. I don't think it's not going to be that easy, unfortunately. But this turning on is a big deal because CERN and the LHC are getting ready to draw attention to the next round of potential future colliders. So there's a lot riding on the results because in the next year, CERN will soon be putting forward proposals for an even larger Hadron Collider. So this is the plan for the so-called Future Circular Collider, FCC. So I've got a nice little image here. So here's the LHC, which is 27 kilometers in circumference. And the plan is to have a 100-kilometer long Future Circular Collider. So we're really starting to sort of run up against the borders of what we can do. The idea here is that if you have charged particles going around a circular track, they emit synchrotron radiation. You lose energy, so you need a bigger and bigger circle if you want to go to higher and higher energies, because a bigger and bigger circle means a lesser and lesser sweep, a more shallow sweep around the corners. You lose less energy. So bigger circle means higher energy, essentially. And this will incur a 20 billion cost, and we still have 10 years left on the LHC plus additional upgrades. So
what are they searching for? Does the standard model have
this is the big problem. So this is the big discussion in particle physics at the moment. Is we discovered the Higgs. It's now 10 years since we discovered the Higgs. 2012. It's Higgs.
Crazy. That's flown.
I was going to say Higgs Memorial Year. It's Higgs anniversary year. Yes. So the Higgs boson anniversary of discovery this year. That was the big final part of the standard model that the LHC was essentially touted to discover, and it did do so. However, they'd also expected that we'd find, a slew of new particles that would fit with new theories, new hypotheses, and we haven't really done as much of that as we would have liked. We found new types of matter, new bound states. We found a lot of interesting stuff and a lot of hints, but not as many maybe blockbuster new things as we might have wanted to find. completely new particles, physics beyond the standard model that we wouldn't have expected. There haven't been a lot of huge surprises, and that obviously feeds into the decision of anyone to want to put a lot of money towards another collider. If you don't have a clear goal of what you're looking for, it's more of a speculative, let's take a look, let's see what's there approach. That's potentially less likely to get funding. Now, I'd make the case it's blue sky research, go out, have a look, see what we find. But people have got to cough up the money. They've got to get the money from somewhere. So it's
you could buy half a Twitter for this, let's be honest.
What do we say, 20 billion? So maybe we just ask Elon to shake his pocket change out again. What do you think?
Well, I mean, we're always pushing the boundaries, right? And if there's nothing coming out of LHC, build a bigger one. I mean, eventually you kind of hit the limits of the diameter of the Earth, but surely there are real challenges to this in terms of just the impacts of different kind of gravity in different regions and just how difficult it is to build a big tube that you can steer beams around. So is there some fundamental limit that you hit before you get to the diameter of the Earth that just means it's feasibly impossible? They couldn't build like a continent-wide collider, for example.
So I mean, there have been. You might remember I did a video where there's been a suggestion of a lunar collider, right, where they just go around the circumference of the moon. I guess the issue on the Earth is that you have to go through stuff and through a hell of a lot of different countries, which all have to sort of agree that they're not going to blow it up or pull bits out of it and look after it. I think it's probably would be as much a logistical and political nightmare as much as building the damn thing. So I don't believe there's any calls to do that. The shift has really
you wouldn't have a problem. You wouldn't have like a flat Earth problem that if you tried to do a ring that was technically like flopped over the Earth like this, because locally. Well, no,
but the LHC
is magnetic field's just sorted out.
But the LHC isn't a perfect ring, right? It has straight bits and curves and all these kind of things. So you can.
Oh, really?
Yeah.
So this is just idealized diagrams.
Yeah, it's just idealized diagrams,
Sam, that are just in your head that the world doesn't know. I never. So LHC is not like a perfect circle.
No.
It's
track.
Is that because it's like got to kind of avoid?
Yeah, it's got to avoid certain geographical places, I guess. So it's not. It's certainly not a perfect circle by any means.
I don't mean to sound rude, but like it's the first time I learned something for ages. Only joking. So has someone mapped the actual shape? Is it? Don't tell me it's like shaped like a rude drawing and it's a huge in-joke in particle physics. So is it basically a big ring, or are you telling me that it's actually like a racetrack shape or something and they just lie about it?
So I don't know. I've never actually had a think about what the actual shape is, but for next time I will promise.
I need to know this.
We do need to know. I will promise to go and find out what the exact shape.
This is one of the biggest.
Do you know what? I bet like it doesn't.
It
won't even show up on like the resolution of this diagram because it's just like a tiny straight bit here. But
tiny deviation.
Yeah, exactly. Tiny deviation. It's going to be so disappointing. But I will go and have a.
You've moved your head too far. Have a shake. Have a wiggle. You're back. No.
I'm back. So yeah, it's a difficult sell at the moment. But one of the cool things I did notice, how's your time today, by the way?
Yeah, we're good for a little bit longer.
Good for half an hour or something?
No, that's stretching it.
All right.
Let's finish Anubis and then do one more thing, Bobby.
All right, fair enough. So one of the cool things that I've been looking at this week is because of depends how you want to sell this. We haven't found as much stuff as we would have liked to, and they're looking at finding other different things. So there's a set of theoretical models that suggest that the particles that we're missing could be long-lived neutral particles. Now the issue with this is the detectors at the LHC at CERN are very close to the interaction point, right? They're massive, but they're close to the interaction point. And the reason for this is because the protons smash together, you produce all these new particles, but these particles decay away very quickly, right? So you detect or you find them by looking at their decay products. The decay products ping into your detector, lights up these pixel tracks, you map the tracks, and then you trace them back to the same point in space, and you say, okay, they came from a decay. These two tracks came from a particular decay. So you can, trace the two particles back, and you see where they came from.
I think what you're saying is
this is not a diagram in space. It's a Feynman diagram, but to give you the general idea, right?
So I think what you're saying is that
this gives you a better
the point
idea.
Where they collide, lots of energy, stuff starts flying out, and you've got these rings of detectors to try to actually catch the data in a manner.
Exactly.
But if there's something is super energetic and also neutral,
correct,
so isn't being picked up by magnetic fields, it might punch all the way through your detectors.
Yep.
And sometime later, when it's now in the earth somewhere, underground or now out in the air,
it decays into charged particles.
It slows down enough to be observed, but there's no detector there.
Yes,
because it's
exactly, right? So if you have these long-lived neutral particles, they can be created at the proton collision, punch all the way through your detector, decay, but there's no detector there to see that decay and to catch these two tracks that came from the same particle interaction point.
It's just heating up poor old Janet in the canteen making lunch every day.
Exactly.
At the top.
Basically, yeah. So she's getting bombarded with new physics.
With Nobel Prize winning stuff.
With Nobel Prize winning physics, and we're just missing it because of essentially the scale of our detectors. Right? Yeah. So there's a couple of ways you can get over this. And one of the ways has been to essentially put in a load of detector extensions, which I hadn't been made aware, or at least I hadn't made myself aware of, which I have this week by looking into a lot of these things. So there's a couple of ways you can go. One way is you make your detector bigger in 3 dimensions. Now, what's the problem with that?
Very expensive.
Very expensive. And you're in an underground cavern, so you ain't going too far in 3 dimensions, right?
Yeah.
So you can make a bigger detector. Or what I found the coolest thing, and there's a couple of detectors that are now doing this. One particular that I came across was Anubis, which I'm going to do a longer documentary style video on, is you can extend your detector. So imagine Atlas sits at the bottom of this tunnel. You can extend it up existing infrastructure like the shaft that they use to bring the Atlas pieces down to the floor. You can put detector rows in essentially that tube, and you can extend your Atlas detector in a particular defined direction. Now, of course, that's only a small slice of the kind of whole solid angle which the particles will come out at. But if you get enough, if it's a big enough fraction of a solid angle, then it doesn't really matter. You don't need all of these particles. You just need enough to be able to see a reasonable flux. And it turns out there's this 18-meter diameter service tunnel. So what they're intending to do, or the idea is, that they're going to put, let me go back a little bit. They're going to put rows of detector up this shaft, and they'll be able to actually see the decays going all the way up this shaft. Can I get the, so they put these detector stations in the shaft. They'll be able to see the decays of these neutral particles that have punched out of the detector in this shaft. And all of it without extending the detector in 3 dimensions, without doing any more digging. And the really, really cool part of this is, it's not going to be in situ all the time. What they're going to do is, they're going to lower it down from the top on steel ropes, and then it's going to fix into the walls of the shaft with these let me see if I can find the picture. I think it's in this diagram. Fix into the walls of the shaft. No, it's not in here. Using mountaineering cams. So the weight of the detectors will actually secure it in the shaft. And then when you want to use the shaft again to bring something down, you just pull the detector out, pull it to one side, and you've got a working access shaft again.
Yeah.
So you've got this really cool way that you can do additional physics, maybe find different particles with different decay times, and you can strip it out and just move it away at the same time. Something that you never anticipated doing in the first place,
Yeah.
But as
It's a bit mad it's taken them this long to realize you could do it, right? CERN's like older than us, probably.
Well, so this is why I say it depends how you sell it. In one way, the way that they want to sell it to me, and I would sell it to anyone else as a particle physicist, is we are becoming a more mature collaboration, thinking of different ideas. We want to look at more physics.
Detectors are more compact and more mobile. Is probably another key thing.
There's another key thing. The other way that people want to sell it is you haven't found anything, so you're getting a bit desperate and you're going to try different things, right?
It's neat, and I mean, in some senses, when they built it in the first place, you've got your initial target, right? You know that you're going to learn loads and loads of stuff with what you've designed, and so let's leave it till like 30 years time to worry about the stuff neutral and energetic that's far away, and here we are, right?
So here's your next question before we quickly move on from this then. So where else could you stick a detector which would be possible given the current geometry of the LHC? So if your detector is sat in a big cavern on a ring,
well, it's going in all directions,
right?
And so could you use the detectors that are like completely the other? Because there are multiple detectors,
right? So along the ring, along the ring, basically.
An event in A that normally you only worry about using A, but turn the detectors on all the way over here in B, like the other side of the ring.
Not quite as ambitious as that, but
then they're failing.
But you can have it down the ring as well, right?
Yeah.
So you can imagine you can go up or you can go along the ring. So this is another example of one of these experiments that they're putting in for long-lived particles, which is 480 meters down the tube, essentially, from Atlas. Nice. So that gives these particles a long distance to decay, and you're sensitive to a different range of...
It's a lot of $1 bills.
Of decay. Yeah. It is a lot of $1 bills. This one's called phaser, because we always have these... They're either mythological names or they're Star Trek names, basically. This is how we go in particle physics. So you can either go down the tube or you can go up, and that gives you a different set of kinematics, right? The heavy particles can create stuff that decays up because they're created roughly at rest, so you get these back-to-back decays that go, perpendicular to the beam. The really light stuff all gets thrown forward. So this phaser is looking for lighter, long-lived particles, basically.
So is that some, physics is all about like forcing an acronym. So is that like forward array sensing everything, right? Or something? What does phaser stand for?
I am not exactly sure what phaser stands for. Let's have a look.
If they've not spelled it out, then they're ashamed.
They've just put forward search experiment, which is terrible.
Well, there you go. That's rubbish.
Right. So Anubis stands for, if I can find it, where is it? An underground belayed in-shaft search experiment, which I thought was quite good.
Belayed. That they started with Anubis. Let's be
yeah, of course they did.
Yeah.
But belayed means like on ropes, right? Like brought down on ropes.
I do not know. Belayed is fix a running rope around a cleat.
Yeah, there you go.
Wow.
But they definitely started with Anubis. Now the reason they started with this is because Anubis was the god of the dead, who basically took from the living
LHC
over the river, basically over the river or whatever it was and then resurrected in the afterlife. And the idea is that these particles sort of disappear from our view, we don't see them, and then they get resurrected in this extension. So it's quite a cool name.
I see it's your old mates from the Cambridge.
Yeah, exactly. So I'm going to be chatting to these guys next Thursday, and I just recorded a longer documentary style video on this today, which I'll hopefully get out in the next couple of days as well. And I need to do something on the W boson mass as well, which I promised. So yeah, I've been doing a lot of particle physics recently, which is great. But what I found really interesting about this is not only are we going to get more statistics, but you've got all these sort of symbiotic experiments which have now been added, all these extensions which have been added to try and find additional physics as well. And that's either because we haven't found anything or because we want to look for more stuff. Decide amongst yourself which one you think it is. But it's a very cool experiment, and I'm going to be doing a lot more on it. So if you want to know more about this Anubis experiment, watch out for that documentary that's coming. We might not have time for the Avi Loeb one. I really want to talk about this one. So, because
Well, you have to show me the video. I've not seen this yet. Just cringed about it.
Incredibly cool. So let's have a look. What's going on? So this is Rocket Lab.
Let me guess. It's a start.
So Rocket Lab are launching rockets from New Zealand, I believe.
Yeah.
I can probably whiz this on a bit. But they have their rocket, and the first stage, which obviously launches the rocket towards space, falls back to Earth. So and here it is falling back to Earth on a parachute. And what they've decided to do is capture these first stages using helicopters. So the helicopter comes along, hooks onto this falling rocket first stage with a big hook, and then carries it back down to the ground. Now, for your SpaceX and what have you, these things are automated, right? It sort of just parachutes itself down, and then the retros go and it just sits down back on the pad.
SpaceX is particularly smart.
Good at this. Yeah.
So the traditional 1960s USA put men on the moon, and then the boosters on the side of the shuttle afterwards. It was just that, which is parachute all the way down to the ground, hit the ground somewhere, or land in the ocean, and then go get picked up and repair the thing, because it's either very, very wet or it's bashed into a mountain somewhere. SpaceX, really interestingly, keep enough fuel to actually go through a really neat, clever, automated closed loop, land on a pad using the rocket's remaining fuel. Very clever, and kind of breaking the original rules of only take as much mass up to space that you need, because obviously they're taking the fuel up that they use to come back down. This company, therefore, will be having a cheaper solution still, because you're not taking fuel up that you haven't to come back down. But cheaper, yeah, still. I mean, you're paying your helicopter pilot's danger money. Or have I spoiled? Do you want to carry on?
So I was going to say, there's levels of cheap, isn't there? Because if you can pay a helicopter man, have a helicopter in the first place, pay a guy to go hooking rockets out of the sky, it's probably not going to be that cheap. But compared to making new first rocket stages over and over and over and over again every single time, because you've lost it or it's fallen in the sea and you didn't go get it, or you have to repair it from pretty much scratch, it can be significant cost savings. So this is sort of a budget version of SpaceX's landing back on the pad, essentially.
Adding some danger to try and make
adding some danger. So it's
a bit like the sweatshop of space.
So here's a video of the sort of pilots closing in on it. So the pilots closed in on this thing, and they did hook it as they were trying to do, but then it was decided that they just weren't feeling it. So the pilots on the day decided something feels a little bit wrong. Probably the fact that you've got a massive rocket stage hanging off the bottom of your helicopter. And they decided plus a parachute. So they hook the parachute. Actually, they don't get close to the rocket. They just
but still, like, depending on how that parachute collapses or doesn't collapse, like, you don't want to fly a helicopter with a bloody parachute swinging around like this underneath it, catching the air, causing drag. Either the thing started swinging itself in a horrible state, penduluming the helicopter, or the parachute was billowing out the back. But yeah, for whatever reason, they had to bail the thing into the sea in the end anyway.
Exactly. So in the end, they decided to dump the thing into the sea because they just decided that this was too dangerous to continue with. Now, this has been taken as a big success because they managed to locate the thing, they managed to hook it. They just decided at the last minute that they didn't want to keep it. They dropped it into the ocean, and when it was recovered, the company's obviously saying it was in good state. We could essentially use it pretty much straight away again. So everything happy, everything good. Which, of course,
suggesting they should have just let it parachute into the ocean in the first place.
Which, yeah, I wasn't going to mention that, but yes, pretty much. So, but obviously, the guy who runs the company is going to say that. They say this went incredibly well. So, and they got 99% of what they wanted to understand about this process, and it's the true long-term goal of this is surely that it's an automated, unmanned, autonomous aerial platform that picks this thing up. But you would imagine by the time you've got to that stage, you could probably just do the landing back on the pad thing. I mean,
Well, I mean, I was just talking about trying to remove the a very expensive pilot that you have to then pair of pilots that you have to then pay the wives or mothers the insurance payout when they're killed by a parachute getting tangled in the blades of their helicopter over the ocean.
So apparently
But yeah,
this thing
there's an
is
interesting one
falling.
about, do you automate the booster itself to land itself, or do you automate something to go catch the
Hmm.
booster? And there's a whole, I mean, I'd love to see their business plan and the costings as to why this is cheaper and what the other options are. I mean, is the cheapest thing that you have some guidance on the parachute and some fins on this so that it can do some steering towards a automated ship that basically has a big net on it, and you just catch the parachute that's trying to meet you that you're trying to meet. Helicopters are expensive, crew are expensive, and colliding two things in midair at high speed is silly. So
So Lionel says that Rocket Lab doesn't want to spend money on their own personal ocean-going fleet. Their boosters are significantly smaller than F9, so catching is considerably cheaper and simpler. Apparently,
the helicopter has to take off and land from somewhere.
that's true.
So they're either always going to be near the air bases that the helicopters are taken off from, or the helicopters are taken off from boats. So it's one of those two. Helicopters don't have a huge range.
Mm. So we're gonna have to see this, but very very cool, very very interesting to watch.
Very dangerous.
Very very dangerous. Very 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 interesting. Very very interesting approach. But
This reminds me, actually, there was a real like 1960s CIA technique that was actually used in a Bond film. I think
well, it reminded me of the. Have you seen the
Films,
skyhook thing he has in
yeah.
the second Batman film, where it just like rags him out of a skyscraper and off you go?
I think you're right. It might have been used in Batman as well, actually. But yeah, exactly. A rapid removal of human from area thing, where you unleash a balloon and you're attached to a wire,
Yeah,
and an aircraft comes with what looks like scissors
yeah,
to catch the wire.
yeah.
I mean, yes, there's heritage of catching things, and in fact, early spy. This isn't actually new. Early spy satellites were obviously film before digital. So in the 60s, low Earth orbit spy satellite, it was all film. And so unsurprisingly, to get the footage back from the spy satellite, it would dump this canister that fell through the Earth's atmosphere, parachute opened, and this is exactly how we used to pick up our spy satellite footage as well. So that was much smaller, though, obviously, than a massive rocket booster.
Yeah, very very cool. So we should probably wrap up because I guess you need to get going. That people were mentioning so there was an Avi Loeb article we haven't quite got to on based on time. So essentially,
whiz through it quickly.
Do you want to mess with it quickly?
Yeah.
So where is it? This one is festooned with adverts. So see if I can close this down a little bit. So this was in the Metro, probably where it belongs, to be honest. So
we last in the Metro.
yeah,
I think we're in the Metro and the Telegraph with our Wordle.
No, we were in the Telegraph, right, which is a bit Tory for us probably, but anyway, and then well, I just don't like any of them, to be honest. And then we were in the Metro, which is
yeah, I think we were. Anyway,
we're doing all right. We're doing all right. But Avi has been saying some interesting things. So essentially, a couple of years ago, he and one of his students, I believe, found an asteroid, I believe, which had crashed to Earth, and it was later identified.
Meteor. It becomes a meteor when it enters our atmosphere.
Sorry, a meteor. That's right.
No worries.
Well, this is your field, right? So we've got off the particle physics. You're into bat now, and this thing crashed to Earth, and it was later, or Avi and his collaborator were saying that it come from interstellar space, I guess, right?
So what was this? But the speed and the trajectory, I presume, they must have estimated that it entered the Earth's atmosphere with such speed that it wasn't one of our local objects.
Basically, so based on some military tracking, they managed to work out that this thing had come not from our own solar system, essentially.
Yeah.
And this was the first sort of object like this that had been identified. So really cool discovery. They weren't able to post this because a lot of the information that they had used was military information. Department of Defense, I guess.
So that means they had data from military radars, probably.
Yeah, they had information from military radar. They couldn't post it. And then I believe this block has been lifted recently where they now are able to post it. And the US Space Command is saying, look, this was confirmation of an interstellar object, which had been previously detected by Avi and his collaborators, which is a really, really cool finding. Now, usually that would be where the story ends. Really cool finding, interstellar object crashes to Earth. Wow, that's really cool. But Avi being Avi, that's not the end of the story. I assume you're reading this to try and get more
I'm quickly scanning the Metro article. Yeah, exactly. But I am listening. Go ahead.
No, please do. So Avi decided that that's not the end of the story. And actually, what this thing probably is a spacecraft that came from interstellar space and crashed into Earth, because of course he thinks it is.
So he's basically saying that something came from very, very far away. And so there are two options. Either it's a natural object that came from very, very far away, or
which happens all the time.
What do we think the probability of these two might be?
So, okay. I mean, I have no problem with, him saying it could possibly be this. He's a little bit off the wall with these things. But
probability not zero.
Probability not zero. We can agree with that, right? I guess, maybe. But he suggested a mission to go and scoop up with what he's called scooping magnets, which I guess is just a magnet on the end of a boat. A boat.
It crashed into the ocean, did it?
Yeah, supposedly.
So he's looking for an alien penny in the ocean, basically.
Well, he's saying that huge bits of this could have survived. So what they want to do is go down and scoop up bits of this wreckage, quote unquote, from under the sea. It's quite a large area. I think it's several thousand square kilometers where it could be. But scoop up debris from the surface, see if they can find anything in it that is unnatural, bits of tech, these kind of things. I mean, I don't really have any serious objection to this. I don't imagine it has a very high chance of success, but
this is pretty mad.
I mean, it does. I'm trying to be no chance of this being a spaceship, but it's very in keeping with Avi's style, shall we say.
I should have read up on this, and maybe we'll come back to it next time, because how much money have we spent trying to look for MH370? And at least we knew how big that was and roughly where it was. I mean, trying to find the remains of a meteor that's crashed in the ocean using some radar data as it came through the atmosphere is going to be tricky, I would say. Unless it crashed very near a radar and they managed to
smashed into a radar. So my only sort of wider thought on this is, I don't really care if you can get the money and go and do it. But my understanding, and when we talked to Mick West, we sort of had this understanding of as well, was that the idea behind the Galileo project and these kind of things that Avi is behind was to try and make it not silly anymore. We're going to look at these things. We're going to have an open mind. We're not just going to say people are conspiracists because they want to look for weird things that are going on in the sky and these kind of things. And then the ideas that he comes up with don't really seem to have a good science case. If he was to say, this is a really cool interstellar object, let's go pick it up from the ocean floor, see what the components of it are, see what the chemistry is, how things are changing. Are they exactly this? Is it exactly the same science that seems to be going on in interstellar space? That to me would be a really interesting, on its own, science case to go and find bits of this thing, if it were possible, depending on the assessment of how likely it is to find these things. It's that jump straight to, it came from out interstellar space, so there's a really good chance it could be aliens. That seems to sort of not really jive very well for me with that project. I don't know how you feel about that.
Yeah, he's creating his own persona as being the is it Harvard or Stanford?
I think it's
professor?
Harvard. Yeah, Harvard.
Yeah, of this. And there's a lovely quote I saw in your notes somewhere about him. Didn't he say something like he'd love to dig this thing up from the ocean and like press a button on
Yes. So
an
let
alien?
me see if I can
With that
find that.
quote.
Let me see if I can
Uh,
find that quote for you. So what did he say? Better still, perhaps some technological components would survive the impact. So I think one of his ideas was it might be a probe. Would we send probes to other planets to crash into the ocean? Yes, we might, I guess. So it could be a probe, and his dream was to sort of press some buttons on a functional piece of equipment that was manufactured outside of the Earth. So
and activate the alien doomsday device.
you sort of. I don't want to make fun because this project is trying to not make it be made fun of anymore. But when you lead the evidence so strongly, you open the door.
That's what I mean. Yeah, exactly. It's sort of the scientific approach is something interesting has crashed into the ocean, and let's investigate what it is. Not I'm going to go desperately search for aliens.
Now, so before we finish, that we should tee up what we want to look at. So last time we mentioned there's a bunch of people who have been working on trying to where is it? Let me see if I can find it. I've got it in here somewhere. There it is.
Tear in the Sky documentary.
Yes. So this is now a documentary that we discussed last time has now come out. This Tear in the Sky. So this
or
is
a tear in the sky.
It does look like Tear in the Sky.
Yeah.
But Tear in the Sky. So this is a bunch of military personnel, scientists who went to Laguna in California, I believe, set up a load of sensors and tried to look for anything weird that's going on in the sky. UAPs, essentially. Now, we haven't watched this yet, so we don't know exactly what they show. The trailer was god-awful for making it serious, as a lot of people have said. But we'll keep an open mind and see exactly what they found in their actual analysis. So I'm intending to come down to you, I guess, in the next couple of weeks, and we will get the popcorn out, get the beer out. We'll watch this, and we'll try and give it as fair an assessment as we can and see if this is moving in the right direction of trying to be scientific about these things rather than the intro and trailer of this, which was talking about wormholes and William Shatner
it's
going
definitely
mad.
Interesting that there's a lot going on in the US on this at the moment, with Congress being briefed on things, and I find it very interesting because there's always been lots of historical evidence that people see strange things in the sky, and of course this is also always cited, right? You know, there's biblical records, there's all sorts of people from different cultures. There's the famous Foo Fighters during World War II of pilots having strange lights and things around in the sky. There are some natural phenomena that we know and have documented that are strange, like ball lightning is a real thing, and there's been plenty of work on trying to reproduce ball lightning. You know, ionized air does exist. You get St. Elmo's fire and other things that can cause lights in the sky. There's been these famous videos now from 2004 and some in 2012, I think, and many others of actual military sensors on aircraft picking up strange things at a distance that are hard to explain. And so it's interesting to try to look at what these things could be and how we might go about assessing that. But
because even if these things aren't aliens, and I have no reason to think that they are, and I don't think they are, we want to know what the hell's going on, regardless.
But you see, this is the really interesting thing. As an experimental physicist who's always worked with sensors and always dealt with sensors doing interesting things or people messing with sensors, the W boson is a great example, right? There's something which the sensors suggested is completely unexpected and not what we think it is. But no one goes, aliens have made the W boson heavier, right?
Don't give people ideas, because then people don't tend to get as sweary and conspiratorial. Well, I say that actually about fundamental particle physics. There is a whole lot, if you want to go and look in the deep depths of YouTube and other places. There's whole there's a Shiva statue that was delivered by India or something at CERN. All sorts of mad people saying about gates to the afterlife and, creating black holes and all these sorts of these things. So there is a lot of occult, weird stuff in the background, but it tends not to be as in the mainstream as UFOs and UAPs and aliens.
The thing that I just always keep going back to is this like sphere of observability issue, right? So you can do some quite simple probability arguments that kind of say, assuming that there's a random distribution of alien spacecraft, appearing every now and again anywhere they like on the Earth and visiting and doing stuff, then it should not be the case that for all of time, we've only ever been very far away from them and taken very blurry pictures. The laws of probability suggest that if there's really this many of all of the, interactions and insights, especially today, go back a little bit, i.e. before smartphones, and the kind of records of abductions were much higher than they are today. And there is still not yet a single live stream Facebook feed of an abduction going on. Someone going, oh, well, do you know what? Funnily enough, I carry my phone around with me all the time. I'm going to live stream this alien abduction. And funnily enough, the prevalence of alien abductions seems to have dropped off at the same rate.
It is interesting that as the ubiquity and quality of sensors increases, the evidence seems to remain frustratingly constant.
They seem to move further away.
Yeah. So I'm not convinced. But as I say, I'm willing to allow people to look at these things sensibly. I just think when you lead the evidence so much like this, like Avi is in this instance, the instance we were talking about, it's a little bit silly. But we're going to have a look at this documentary. I believe they did say they found some odd weather phenomenon that might not have been explained previously. So there might actually be some, and that might be what the tear in the sky thing is, which the kind of oddball lady on there wanted to call a wormhole, but might just
believe it was labelled in the trailer as a wormhole.
Yes.
It'll be interesting to see if they've rediscovered what climatologists and meteorologists refer to as an inversion of temperature that causes condensation in the atmosphere and changes the imagery on their sensors.
But this is what I'm saying as a scientist. This is the sort of thing that quite upsets me, because if they have found some new type of temperature inversion meteorological phenomenon, that's cool, right? I want to know about that. That's really interesting. It could have impacts for travel or sensors or communications or whatever. Who knows, right? It's interesting in and of itself, and I'd like to know about it. I don't need aliens tacking on. Just have the science, see what it is. If it turns out to be aliens in the end, cool, that'll be awesome. But it's the leading of the evidence which is the real problem for me. And a lot of people who are in that field say the same, right? They don't like this this kind of preempting it because it makes them all look like conspiracists and weirdos and crackpots. And there's some people in that field who are trying to actually work out some odd things that are going on in the sky, like you say.
Yeah. As an experimentalist, you always have to have a really careful balance. You generally only do your experiments and fund your experiments because you are hoping to find something that you think is there. So you go in with your theories and your hypotheses. But a really good scientist is always ready to begrudgingly abandon years of work that they have done on the theory leading up to that point. This is one of the interesting things about PhD. I don't know if you had the same sort of experience in yours, but the end of my first year, I had been developing this model and building a simulator and doing all of this stuff, and realized when it all ran and that what I was trying to look for was it was happening like orders of magnitude below what I could sense. And I just knew I was completely at a dead end and would have to back out. Everything I'd done for the last year would be not usable. And I didn't use it. And I looked at other things. And it's a very sobering experience as a scientist. And I just wrote off a year, right? But some scientists, good scientists, might write off 10 years of their work, because at the revelation moment, they find out that the revelation is that they were wrong, not that they were right. And it takes a particular character, I think, to be able to do that. And to go, do you know what? This is what science is. It's not going to waste. I can now write a paper that says, hey, no one else should spend 10 years of their life looking at this. But that's the problem. A lot of science is looking for the positive outcome, not the negative outcome. And journals can limit people writing. You know, it's hard to get a paper published that's like, I did this.
I found nothing. Yeah. No, it is. And I'd actually go a step further and say that it's a very important and worthwhile experience for a scientist to go through, to have a lot of work that you did or something you believed in very, very strongly be proven false by enough reason and evidence. It's a very, very good thing for you to go through. There's been things in my life that I've believed, and I'm sure there are things that I believe now where people will present enough evidence to me and I'll go, fuck, it's completely wrong. Like, it looked like that to me at the time, but now the evidence is presented, I'll flip. It's a very, very important skill for a scientist to be able to do. And, you know, just when that comes along, unfortunately, and I think actually, I will say one more thing. Social media and the way things are set up and the way people talk about science are kind of fundamentally at odds with this. It's very hard now, with people being very visible, to say, yeah, I was completely wrong. I'm just going to drop it, reverse course. The guy who was arguing me all the time was completely right. Really sorry. Back off. Go. I think that's easy to do in a scientific, in a science room, in a lab, when you're talking to your collaborator and you go, yeah, yours is right, actually. Yeah, let's go that way. It's fine. I think that's really hard to do with forward-facing people, particularly like Avi is now, like other people are on Twitter, on social media. It's very, very hard for them to say, I worked on this for ages and it's complete bollocks. Yeah. But it's valuable in and of itself and a valuable skill for the person. But it's very, very tough to do, especially in the modern day. I think
you have to go into these things accepting that whether you succeed or fail, you'll have achieved the learning along the way, right? And you need to have a mindset that there isn't actually such a thing as failure, that you turn failures into a success. You just build on them and learn from them and do the next thing. I think that's definitely how experimental scientists have to work. By definition, you can't go through your entire life discovering every single thing you thought.
You don't want to do in PhD, because if you do that in PhD, everyone descends on you and wants to check your work. You just want to find nothing and move on, get your PhD. Right, we better let you go. So you're going to close up with this for 2 minutes and then we're done. So if anyone has any burning questions, get them in now, because Ramsey's going to do a 2-minute blitz on this, because this is his thing. Flying cars, every time you want to talk about flying cars. So finally, it looks like we might get some trials of these things here in the UK. So what's the crack, and what can we expect?
Yeah, so I just came across this recently. There's been a startup in Bristol for a few years now, the founder of which has even been labelled as like Britain's Elon Musk. And if you scroll down, there's probably some cool pictures of his aeroplane, which is labelled as a flying taxi.
Of the football, apparently. Oh, here we go. It's just a plane. It's not a flying car. It's a plane. But it can turn into a car, right? It's Transformers.
No, I doubt it. I think it's just a vertical takeoff and landing. It doesn't need a runway aircraft from the looks of it.
But it could land at your house and pick you up, right?
Great question. Probably not. I suspect it'll be that there'll be like ports around a city, like a bus stop. Yeah. In the same way that you can't just get a bus or a train outside your house, you're probably not going to be able to go pick up one of these from just outside your house. Not when it looks like that. Yet. But yeah,
I wouldn't fancy that landing on my street.
Exactly, and this is why Bristol is an interesting place to start from. But anyway, so I think it's because the company's based in Bristol. So
there's a lot of little windy streets there. You were saying it's been a while since I've been there, but this is not going to be a place with big, expansive roads and where these things can just land wherever they want.
Bristol's a classic British old city where if you look at like a road map, it looks like someone just dropped a plate of spaghetti on the floor and went, ta-da! That is how we shall design the road layout. And it's very narrow. So yeah, it's an interesting one. But yeah, they've got £2.5 million worth of funding or something like that from the government. And there you go. Look at that. It's a plate of spaghetti. I'm not sure where you'd choose your helicopter landing pads. Presumably those parks that you can see there, not the river.
No.
But yeah, I thought that was quite interesting last week. That it's been quite, the flying car scene has been quiet for a little while, but it turns out £2.5 million of British taxpayers' money is being given to this company to do some demos. So they've got a long way to go yet before they can buy Twitter, but let's see how it goes.
If this works,
I might check it out.
If this works, I will pay for us to go and have a go on it and see what's going on, and we can.
Oh, there you go.
We can report live.
We'll do a live stream.
We'll do a live stream, and we'll see what the crack is. But if you have to like drive to one side of Bristol to get on it to go to the other side, it seems a little bit pointless. But we'll see how it goes. It sounds fun all the same. So flying taxis potentially in Bristol in a few years. So very, very interesting. Ramsey, thank you very much for. My guess is no pilots, he says. Oh dear. So I don't think we'll be going on it without a pilot.
Be scary.
They can't get the cars working. I don't fancy the unmanned flying taxi. Adding the flying component in sounds like
that's a really interesting one that I'll try and cover in 10 seconds, which is that there's
less stuff in the air. Yeah, it's
much easier to do autonomous airborne because you don't have idiots crossing the road while drunk or children throwing rocks at you or like drunk drivers or all this kind of stuff. But you've still got to sort out the takeoff and landing aspect. And, if you take you off and landing in cities of children throwing rocks and drunk drivers and dogs running out, then
like Bristol,
the safe zone into the tricky zone. Yeah. Anyway,
yeah,
maybe exactly. We'll keep an eye on that one. But yes, good place to call it a day. Yeah, my dinner will be in the dog, and I don't actually have a dog, so
you'll be in the dog house as well. If I don't let you go now, Ramsey, thank you so much for taking the time. It's always a pleasure to have a chat with you. We will be back in 3 weeks or so, the end of the month. So if you see,
as always, cheers, Sam.
Yeah, my pleasure. If you see any tech news you want to hear about over the next month, feel free to drop it on the channel. We will do our best to cover it. Thanks a lot, guys. See you again in 3 weeks.